Welcome back to the show. It is International Fraud Week, a wake-up call over the fact that organisations worldwide are losing an estimated 5% of their annual revenues to fraud, if a study conducted by the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners is to be believed. And it seems small businesses are particularly vulnerable, given that they typically lack anti-fraud controls compared to their larger counterparts. Let's discuss this further now with Wayne Gilbert, Director of RISQgroup, and Michael Green from the law firm Henry Davis York. Gentlemen, a warm welcome to you both. Why are we now just beginning to see this for what it is, and what after a week changes in terms of the recognition having been put out there, but actually then the follow-through kicking in? Persuade me that there's a commitment to it.
Well, I think there is a global commitment to it from a number of various areas. What changes over a week? Well, nothing really changes over a week. This is about focusing attention and reminding people that fraud is big out there. Fraud within the workplace is big out there. It has really severe impacts on a number of organisations from both a financial perspective and even more so perhaps from a reputational perspective for many organisations, particularly those that are regulated. So it's important just to focus some time to consider, well, how do we better prepare ourselves going forward to make sure that whilst we can never eliminate fraud or corruption in the workplace, what can we do to manage it better?
Well, specifically speaking, when it comes to that, because, you know, Michael, you see it at the coalface, management of it is all very well and good so long as there's the confidence to be on the front foot. But at a time like the present, is there a sort of an appetite to be sort of trying to unearth the bad apples?
I think there is, Carson, yes, both in relation to private companies but also public sector agencies as well. We act for both. And it's because there is now recognition of the cost to the organisation. And as Wayne said, one of the things about the Awareness Week is the word awareness, and it's about making organisations corruption-proof or fraud-proof. And a lot of the very large corrupt matters or fraud matters we've worked on, it's been from a whistleblower or an honest and diligent employee who has actually brought it to the attention of management that there is some anomaly which gets investigated.
Is that sufficient, though? Or does there have to be, when you say to make organisations fraud-proof, that's very much a sort of a will they or won't they type reliance. Is that good enough, Wayne?
Well, look, I think you have to rely on your people. And one of the things that you need to rely on is actually training your people. So sending the message out there about what are the key indicators that we see in fraud, because when we go into an organisation and have to respond to an event that they've had, the typical thing that we see is once we start peeling away the layers of the fraud or corrupt conduct or employee misconduct that we've located within an organisation, there are always red flags that should have been evident, but perhaps people are either not happy to come forward because they believe that they won't be protected, or they are not aware exactly that the behaviour of someone who perhaps is their boss that's asking them to do something against the rules is something that they can escalate and something that they should actually report.
Michael, are you tending to find these problems, though, after the event, in much the same way that an inquiry will be announced and at that point everyone is really on the alert and it's sort of hindsight after the event, which is a wonderful thing, but in reality you're the evidence at the bottom of the cliff. The actions occurred. It's about now just finding the culprit. Again, it's too late.
I think that's a fair comment from a legal perspective, Carson. Yes, we do generally come in at the time when there has been some kind of incidence of corrupt conduct or some fraud that's been uncovered, because we generally come in to help with the recovery part. But I think it's also very important, and this does traverse the law as well, for honest employees to see organisations acting swiftly and appropriately when they do find either fraud or corrupt conduct. They do want to see the management of the organisation deal with those employees swiftly and appropriately.
Are we making the assumption, though, both of you, and to Martin, look, that it is the employees that are at fault here? I mean, the very sort of default position to take there is that the employer is always right and has oversight, when in fact they could be perpetrating this just as much. What do you do in that situation?
Look, I think that's a really great question, Carson. And look, it's not a blame game, I don't think. I think it's look, boards and senior management have certain responsibility. Boards to set the risk appetite, and the risk and fraud is a definite occupational risk out there and needs to be addressed. So boards need to take note of that. Boards need to make sure that themselves and their senior management act with the utmost ethics, because that's the endemic thing that filters down. Because if it's okay for our bosses to be acting unethically, it's certainly okay for us to do the same thing, is the message that gets filtered down. But I think more and more what we're seeing is we're seeing senior management and boards actually call people like us in to help them assess what their risks are, to look at how they can better manage those. And sometimes, often, one of the byproducts of that is actually cost savings in reducing shrinkage that may not be necessarily fraud, but actually improving processes within the business. So there are some real wins to actually looking at this from a proactive perspective, assessing it up front and putting proper strategies in to mitigate.
And learn from mistakes. When something goes wrong, make sure it's properly analysed in the cold light of day, and to move on and to learn from where things have gone wrong in the past. Very important for management and particularly for boards to make sure they do critically look at what went wrong, get expert advice if they want to, but actually look at how they can make themselves more robust and fraud-proof going forward.
Are there certain factors at play in this market, Michael, that sort of are unique to the way individuals perhaps interact with companies here? Is there a greater or a lesser degree of, I suppose, ownership that comes with the role? How do you assess it versus sort of our international peers? Where do Australian employees tend to sort of sit?
I think there's two aspects to that answer. One is, I think, it's very easy for employees, and I've seen instances of this with matters I've worked in, where there have been good fraud controls and there have been good fraud systems where employees still excuse their conduct by saying, I wasn't aware. You know, I think that's an insufficient excuse. But I think in terms of how we, based on the studies that we've looked at in relation to the US in particular, I think Australia is right up there. I think we have, in terms of the way our businesses have responded, I think our government agencies and in terms of corruption and financial institutions in relation to fraud, I think we're up there.
Is that a breeding ground? Is that fair to say that financial institutions, banks, tend to, it's almost too much of a temptation to be true? Do you find that?
Look, I don't know that it's fair to say that, Carson. Right. I think financial institutions in Australia have had their fair share of mega million-dollar frauds over the years. They haven't been exempt from it.
But this idea that of late we are all the time crowing about how good we've got it, that we haven't gone down the road of big loan scandals such as those that have occurred in, say, the United States or into Europe, and therefore the regulatory environment is much more soft on it. Is that a fair call?
Well, I think you have to look at it from two aspects. You have to look at it from occupational fraud and fraud that's external to an organisation, such as credit card fraud, etc. But no matter which set of fraud you look at, the common denominator is people. And it's about, you know, we have a saying in the industry that people are as honest as the circumstances allow. And in a market, as you're describing now, where we're seeing our economies contracting a little, temptations and pressures, financial pressures and others, can become too big for people. And when they know the processes and are able to override controls, there are dangers. So it's incumbent upon businesses, and particularly small businesses where the higher trust models are in place, to make sure that they're vigilant, to look for red flags, etc.
Michael, a brief final thought. Is the public sector more to blame, or is it actually mending its ways in a more appropriate manner at this point in the cycle?
I think definitely mending its ways.
Right.
I think the agencies that we have involvement with invest a lot of time and a lot of resources in making themselves corruption-proof, and again learning from the past and where things have gone wrong. So no, I think they've come a very long way, and I think in terms of in our state in particular with ICAC and with the regulation of and the investigation of corrupt conduct, I think we can be reasonably satisfied as how we are.
We just hope that those small businesses that I mentioned at the top are not going to be the ones to sort of fall through the cracks over all of this. Gentlemen, thank you so much. Appreciate your insights. Wayne Gilbert there from the RISQgroup there, director no less, and as well alongside there Michael Green from Henry Davis York. We will have to see you next week because we are out of time. Thanks for your company.